Can you guys hear me okay? Is my volume coming in? Give me a 5-5 if you guys are hearing me. Testing, testing. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay, I can hear. All right, good. Tested it myself. Yeah, Lauren, I will probably be doing this for the foreseeable future. I know Scott's still he's still so far behind from after the tour. I know he kind of wants me to not. This is something that I can take off of his load, wherever we people get fed, and he is something he didn't have to do. I know he wants to get back in here and do it. He said that, but he's just got so much on his plate today or now. And thank you, Lauren. I completely changed my office around today, and I was really worried that my computer wasn't going to work. I had to get a bunch of stuff set up. He'll be here. We're early. We're about 7 minutes early, so he'll be here soon. Oh, I need to go check them. Questions. You guys see me looking around. I have 4 screens. Well, my screens? No. So it makes life so much easier. Didn't get a lot of questions I got one, but I was able to answer that one. Constitution questions. Is everybody enjoying your summer? How many, actually, here's a question, totally unrelated. How many of you guys are into crypto? You know I'm a big crypto guy, or if you don't, I am. Let me get to this on Telegram. There he is. Doug is here in the building. Doug, you're muted.
Oh, shit. Let me get these guys out of here. Out.
Well, that was rude.
Granddaughters get home and the dogs go nuts. Act like somebody's at the door and it's the granddaughters.
Oh.
Was it muted? I was just now getting on. Give me a chance, man.
Yeah, it was muted. Oh no, you weren't muted. We came on with hearing the dogs.
Yeah, I know, but it takes a moment, man. Jeez Louise, you're impatient.
I'm not impatient.
Well, at least you're not wearing a Dodger hat.
No, I'm wearing my XRP hat. You're like, what? Would you prefer I wear my We the People hat? I can do that.
Oh no, XRP is good. Of course, I'm not going to be able to go to a Raiders game this year after all.
Why is that?
In order to get into the stadium, you have to show proof of vaccination.
Yeah, that won't happen.
You know, for vaccination, it doesn't work, but you got to prove it. It's not even vaccination.
I won't be. I won't be doing that either.
Well, in a few years, we're going to see about a third of the population die.
I would say it's probably sooner than that. I only got one question. Somebody only emailed me one question, and I was able to answer it myself. He actually, he and I has something in common, and something that he didn't really want publicized.
Share something in common, an itchy trigger finger?
Well, that too, yes.
Hi, everybody. So we are live on YouTube, right?
Yeah, no, we're live. We are up and running.
All right. So let me say my appropriate hellos. Hello, audience. Hello, NSA. Hello, FBI. Hey, they got to learn about the Constitution too. I'm glad they snoop on me.
You and that Dr. Pepper, man.
Yeah, it's going to kill me. But I'll be smiling.
What do you know what Dr. Pepper was called before it was Dr. Pepper?
No telling.
Seriously. Do you know what it was? Do you know what it was originally called?
No.
It was originally called a Waco.
Oh, Waco?
Because back in the there was a soda fountain back in Waco, Texas, and He was the one who created the 23 flavors. And so people would come in and they would ask for a Waco. And then it spread. It was his concoction. Now it's Dr. Pepper, 23 flavors.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother story. It's 3:00, man. Let's get into this. Let's get into the Second Amendment.
Hi, everybody. You know, it's funny because I didn't expect to be able to do this today on the computer, but I was going to still do it with my phone. Real quick, everybody, tomorrow's my 37th wedding anniversary. And we were going to go camping, probably like Yosemite, something like that. And my wife's husband is in the hospital ICU. So we said we stay local. So we're going to, we got a hotel on the beach there. Now we're going to leave right after the show's over. We're taking off. There in the Dana Point area, just north of there. Got, you know, beach view, you know, just get away, you know, relax. But I got to tell the story real quick before we get into the Second Amendment, because it so sums up. All right. Have you noticed that when you go out to eat, unless it's a really expensive restaurant, the service sucks even more than it used to? This younger generation, they don't want to work. They don't understand good service. And apparently they don't even understand how you serve a meal traditionally. So I get my meal. Yeah, I'm going to get a salad. My salad comes out with my meal. Now, traditionally, your salad comes before your meal. It's like an appetizer. You enjoy your salad. When you're done with your salad, then your meal comes. That's traditionally, since the day I was born that I remember, that's always been. And I've noticed a lot of restaurants nowadays, they don't necessarily do that. The meal comes out so fast, or they don't time it right or whatever. And so when the lady shows up with my meal and my salad at the same time, I just said, so I take it this place doesn't understand the tradition that the salad comes before the meal. And she says, well, you need to ask if you want your side to come before your meal. So it's a salad. Yeah, but it counts as a side. So that's why it comes with your meal, because it's a side. She's like arguing with me. I said, no, it's not a side. Salads are not a side. Salads come before the meal. So she sets the stuff down. She leaves. She never comes back. We get a totally different waitress. And I'm thinking to myself, did I hurt her feelings? Was I offensive? Was I a bully? Because, you know, remember when we were kids, sticks and stones, sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt me. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
People's words are not supposed to have any effect. It's like someone says something and you don't like it. You don't get offended. Here's what I do. I don't get offended. You can't offend me. If you say something's really messed up, I just say inside my head, wow, that guy's a dick. I mean, that's pretty much it, right?
Mm.
But we've got this whole, and she stopped serving us because I'm assuming, bothered by the fact that I questioned what order my meal's supposed to show up as. Now, here's the other thing. So I didn't give a tip. What I did is I left 2 pennies. That way I give them my 2 cents. She probably didn't even understand that. But anyway, okay. So hi everybody. Now that I've bitched and moaned and groaned, I'm ready to roll. I swear. You know, it's funny. And then I mentioned, show you how naive my wife is. I said, man, snowflakes. She's like, what's that about snowflakes? Is it snowing somewhere? No, honey, she's a snowflake. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, really? Wow. So, I mean, I'm glad my wife's naive, apolitical. She doesn't really get involved in stuff, and she cracks me up. People say, well, do you go to Doug's Constitution classes? And her response is, I have to hear that crap at home. Why would I go to the class?
Oh, I will never forget the first time that I met her. That was interesting.
She's a hoot, man. Hey, audience, let me say this. I've been married 37 years as of tomorrow. High school sweetheart. I love her. She's the love of my life. She is my right hand, whatever. But see, I learned being married to her that God has a sense of humor because opposites attract.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in his infinite wisdom, or because he's got a really messed up sense of humor, maybe a little bit of both, opposites attract. But in our case, it's not just opposites. I mean, there's nothing we have in common except for maybe our children. And also, she's a very strong-minded. Thank God she's not a feminist. Because she's got a real strong mind, strong will. I'm going to work. I'm going to do my thing. And I'm all for a woman having her. Please don't get me wrong, man. She kicks butt, man. She don't need me. She really doesn't, except for maybe to explain the definition of a snowflake. But aside from that, she really doesn't need me, and I'm proud of that. But at the same time, she's not this feminist. I'm trying to compete with men, knock them down, whatever. And when it came time for her kids, she quit working. She took care of the kids, and when they got into school, she started working again. That's the women have the ultimate choice in this country, in that sense. But yeah, my wife is she's a strong-minded individual, and she don't put up with anybody's guff, put it nicely. Yeah, but yeah, 37 years, and she's been a great support when it comes to this. I've been doing the Constitution stuff full time, and when I started doing it full time, her exact words was, "Go for it, knock it out of the park. All I ask is you never ask me for money." So I've got some residual income, and her income, when that takes care of the bills, Constitution stuff sustains itself. And I was just noticing 2/3 of my gross from what I do goes into gasoline and paying for radio shows every week. 2/3 of what I make.
That's insane.
Yeah. So, and now they want to tax me by the mile.
Is that what they want to do in California?
That's what they want to do federally. That's what's inside the infrastructure bill.
I don't see that happening, but whatever.
They tax me by the mile, man. They might put me out of business. I might have to do everything online with Scott McKay.
We'll see. Yes. No, we'll see about this infrastructure bill. But anyway,
so we're in the Second Amendment.
Yeah,
let's do a little refresh.
Yep.
Recap. So let's read it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And it's funny because someone sent me a video that was interesting, that ties into what I want to talk about today about the Second Amendment. And he asked me to give comment, and I'm actually going to do a video on this, so be on the lookout for the video. I haven't made any videos the last 2 or 3 days just because I've been too busy, but this one I'm taking notes. I'm figuring it out. I'll probably do it after we get back tomorrow night. And it was this: does the Second Amendment exist because of slavery? The question is, did they want to make sure that people were armed to put down anti-slave insurrections or revolts? Revolts by the slaves? And it was a good question. Here's why: because it really comes down to what's the definition of the militia? What's the militia really for? Could it be used for that? And if it could be used for that, doesn't mean it was created for that. And the gentleman in the video said some very good points, said some things were kind of off. And so I wanted to kind of talk about the militia for a second. When it says a well-regulated militia here, it's a combination. We're talking about a combination of the organized militia and the unorganized militia. One could even say that the unorganized militia will be unregulated. But a well-regulated militia being necessary, it's necessary for the security of a free state. We talked about this last week. But who is that militia? What is their job? What is their function? Why do they even exist? And to give the person who made this video credit, he said, like I said, some very good things, and I'm going to steal a little bit of it here. Not that I'm stealing, and I already talked about this stuff, but I'm going to kind of use some of his language a little bit just to help understood. I just thought it was done really well in this, at least in this part of the argument, and it's this. Excuse me. Excuse me. Let me wet the whistle here. When the colonies became states, they were their own little countries, sovereign, independent, autonomous, took care of their own business. And understand that these colonies / states, new states, lived in a world of empires. And when you look at the empires and the countries of Europe, they all warred with each other constantly. It was constant fighting. Having a strong armed force, army or whatever, was necessary if you were to protect yourself from foreign invaders. Necessary for the security of a free country in Europe. And so the attitude in the world was, we could take what we want. We're going to use our army to do so. If it's in our best interest, we're going to war with everybody. We'll war with our neighbors, we'll war with that guy, we'll war with that guy. That was the world. So the necessity to have a militia was to protect the states from that type of attack. But now we've got an added caveat, a new federal government that also is potentially tyrannical. But what about the other states? Could also having a militia be important because they didn't know if this grand experiment would work. They're surrounded by, each of these states are surrounded by 12 other small independent countries that are also well armed with a strong militia. What if the grand experiment doesn't work? What if Massachusetts or Virginia decides they want to start invading other states? Do you not want to have a militia to protect you from that possibility? So the militias, and I agree with this to a point. I don't think that they distrusted each other as much as this guy was making it out to be, but I do think there was a certain element of that there. It's reasonable to consider that the states realize that they have been arguing with the other states over tariffs and turf and all that. And it would be possible for one, two, or more to become violent and volatile against their neighbors. And you would need a militia to protect yourself individually against something like that. So you need your militia to protect you against these foreign countries, these empires. You need your militia to protect you against a potentially tyrannical federal government, and you need your militia to protect you against, well, the other states in case this grand experiment doesn't work. Now, in any place in that conversation, was slavery mentioned? No. The purpose of the militias had nothing to do with slavery. Now, the argument is, yeah, but the militias could be used to put down a uprising by the slaves, and so the Second Amendment protected, the white people from uppity blacks. Well, whether or not it could be used for that, it wasn't designed for that. And go back to the gentleman who made the video, and he says, I've got a car in the garage, and in the middle of the night I could use it to take someone to the hospital, but I didn't buy it for that purpose. Just because it can be used for that, that doesn't mean that was the purpose of its purchase. The purpose of it, the purpose of the militia, is to defend, protect, promote the Union, the states from each other, from potentially federal government, tyrannical federal government, and outside invaders. That's the purpose. Their very presence and being capable of being used to put down a revolt did exist. And then he said something else that, and it's a little off the Second Amendment, but I want to make sure this is understood about the time, because I want us to understand the people of the time. And he says, well, a vast majority of white people back then, this is just because this is the way it was, because, history tells us is that a vast majority of the white people at the time did not see people with darker skin as being human beings the same way they saw themselves. Well, that's buying into the CRT BS. And let's examine that for a second. Once again, I'm off the Second Amendment. I understand, but this is important because I want us to understand these people at the time. If a vast majority of the white people believed that people with darker skin were not human, they should be enslaved, and supported slavery, then how is it that 11 of the 13 states agreed with the anti-slavery language of the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. And the only two states that did not agree with it were among the least populated states when it came to whites.
Which were?
Georgia and South Carolina. So how is it that the vast majority of white people believed this, but yet 11 of the 13 states, 11 states with larger populations, by the way, than those two that didn't, agreed with the anti-slavery language in the original Declaration of Independence. And the only reason why they removed it was because they wanted to make sure it was unanimous, and they allowed those two states to dictate those terms so that they would get their signature on it, because those two states needed to be a part of the union, because like it or not, they were a buffer between the rest of the country and the the Spanish Empire to the south in Florida. So just looking at history, and then he gets into citizenship, which I'll talk about another time when we get the 14th Amendment, because that's important. And once again, he was a little off, because and all you gotta do is look in the Constitution and the writings of the time to know that. But anyway, so same thing with the Second Amendment. The language is there for a reason, and certain things mean certain things. And so a well-regulated militia, the militia is necessary to the security of a free state. Security of a free state from whom? Foreign invaders? Well, yeah. Potentially tyrannical federal government? Absolutely. Possibly other states if the grand experiment doesn't work? Absolutely. And understand something else, and this is something that this guy did say that I agree with. When the Second Amendment was written, it gave nothing to nobody. This is not giving you your right. This is not even telling government they don't have the authority. It's a reminder. They already didn't have the authority. No authority regarding guns exists in the Constitution already. So this does not take away any authority they might have had. They already didn't have it. It doesn't take it away. It's just to use a word I used earlier, but in a different way, a buffer. Saying, hey, you're not given the authority to mess with our guns, but just to make sure you get it, we're going to make sure we write an amendment just to double down on that. Our guns are none of your business. Why? Because our guns are to protect us from your business or your potential business against us. So
I have a question for you, Doug, and
Sure.
this is related to the topic of conversation. What is your stance, or maybe a better question is, where do ghost guns fit within the Constitution?
They fit in with all other guns. It's none of the federal government's business.
In what way? Now, you know, when I was I attended many a gun show, and I sold 80% lowers.
Right.
And an 80% lower, for some of you who are unaware of what this is, an 80% lower, according to the ATF, you are legally allowed to make your own firearms at home. So the 80% lower was a lower receiver that was 80% completed. You had to finish the other 20% in order for you to have a functional firearm. By doing so, you did not have to go through any sort of a background check. You could do whatever you wanted to do. You could take it home and make it and have a functioning firearm. And I know that ATF and the Biden administration, they're trying to do away with that. I know California has said that you can't produce an 80% lower. You have to apply for a serial number, and you have to serialize your 80% lower before you do it.
Well, first of all, any gun, whether you made it or somebody else made it, shouldn't have to get a serial number, registration number, or anything from the federal government, period.
I get it.
Whether or not a state wants to require that, that's up to the state. But from a point of view of your right, even the state should not really be involved in that. Not because of the Second Amendment, but because it's your right. And it goes back to what I was saying about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have the right to pursue having a gun. Government's job is to get out of the way so you can pursue it. Their job is not to put up obstacles. If I want to have a gun, the only obstacle that should be there is the fact that I got to save up the money to buy it. That pretty much should be the only obstacle. Government's not supposed to be involved. Now, like we were talking about last week, states can make some laws regarding guns, and I'm glad they can make some of them. But there are laws that they should make and shouldn't make. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Getting back to the state and making laws. This idea of serializing guns is nothing more than a registry. It's nothing more than saying we want to make sure we know what you have so that when it comes time for us to take them, we know what to look for. Ultimately, that's what it is.
You said something, just a refresher to everybody. What we talked about last week is that the Constitution is expressly written to as a restriction or as a prohibition against the federal government from creating laws. This does not. You do not want the states. The states.
Well, you don't want them handcuffed in the same way. Yeah.
The states actually have a way. The states actually have a right to create laws. Now, that doesn't mean that we like the laws, but the states actually have.
Now, let me clarify that a little bit. The federal government's not supposed to make domestic laws. They can make other laws, about trade and tariffs and all that's great. But laws that we have to abide by, I don't think so. That's up to each state.
Well, the two major pieces of firearms legislation that are in existence right now. The first one arose from Prohibition. That was you have the 1934 National Firearms Act, and that restricted that put a $200 tax stamp on short barrel rifles. That was to prevent people from doing sawed-off shotguns. You had silencers to basically to make the firearm quieter. What you see in the movies when somebody puts a silencer on a firearm and you pull the trigger and you don't hear anything, that's not accurate. When you have when you put a suppressor or a silencer on a weapon and you pull the trigger, you still hear something. It may not be as loud, but it is still there. You still hear something. Now the third thing is an automatic weapon, and that was really because of the Thompson submachine gun. So that was the first major federal piece of legislation, was to prohibit fully automatic weapons, silencers, and sawed-off or short barrel rifles, meaning that if you have a rifle, it has to be at least 16 inches long. The second piece of legislation that came in was in 1968 with the Gun Control Act, the GCA. Now, the GCA is what has impacted many people, and that's what it created prohibited possessors. So if you committed a crime, a federal crime, then you lose the right to possess a firearm. And I am
now of course I don't believe that you lose the right, but they're blocking your access to that right. And so here's the question. Does someone with a criminal record in the past who's paid their due have the right to protect their family against someone invading their premises?
Yes.
So why are we taking their firearm from them?
Well,
now what you do, if you want to keep them from having firearms, what you do is you don't keep them from getting the firearm. What you do is you make the penalty for another firearm charge that you're indicted for and found guilty of, make the punishment greater than it would have been had you have not had that previous conviction. In other words, put other deterrents in place of them using it in a wrongful fashion. But to keep them from being able to defend themselves, and I guarantee you, if the feces hits the rotating blade, I want that guy next to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know many people who are, well, they are classified as prohibited possessors and they don't care. They still carry. They still have.
Right. Well, I've got a friend of mine who is considered that, and he's getting ready to try to still get a hold of a gun. And you know why he's a prohibited possessor? Because right before he got a divorce, he and his wife got a big argument. And when she went to attack him, he pushed her back. She tripped. And then she accused him of domestic violence. And that's on his record. All of that. And he can't have a gun.
So so that was an accusation.
And she charged him. It was an accident. Yeah, he pushed her back. But when he did, she tripped over something and bumped her head. Because she bumped her head and went to the hospital, he can no longer own a firearm. But she attacked him. Now here's the thing. He since went to court and had that expunged, in other words, changed. But the state of California, because it was once on his record, doesn't matter if it's gone now, will still not allow him to own a firearm.
Right. So
because it was once there.
And John, we're talking about how we're talking about if the difference between federal and state. See, if you commit a crime at the federal level, or you're prosecuted in federal court, my understanding is the only way that you can the only way you can restore those rights is through presidential pardon. They used to have a mechanism. I've actually looked into this. They used to have a mechanism where you could the ATF could go through and they actually had a department that would go through and go through the process of restoring rights after.
It was on a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
Yes, but they no longer do that. And actually, I think that ended in like the 90s under the Clintons, and no surprise there. But in terms of the states, if you commit a state crime, then those are all. That's not really. It's outside of the federal purview. It's a state by state issue. So
now, then it depends on, well, if you go to a different state, then it depends on, does their background check accept out of state things as well or not? In most states they don't. So
really,
yeah. If you can actually go to Oregon, and if you weren't allowed one in California, you would be allowed to as a new resident in Oregon.
Well, I've never heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I had to look into it for a friend of mine. That same friend I was just talking about.
Interesting.
But the thing is, here's what it comes down to. If it is a right, first of all, Second Amendment doesn't grant you the right. You don't have the right to keep bear arms because of the Second Amendment. It doesn't guarantee it, doesn't protect it, doesn't grant it. That right came to you from God.
That's right.
So you already possess it. And God existed prior to government. So there's a higher power that they must answer to. You hear that? Higher power that they must answer to. Matter of fact, I did a show last Saturday and on Sunday on somebody else's program, just talking about the difference between the rule of law and the rule of man. See, the thing is, their attempt to take your guns from you, that's following what's called the rule of man. The rule of law exists. That's a higher power. That's God's law.
Hold on one second, Doug. John, I'm also an Arizona resident, and if I understand it correctly, if you live in Arizona, you actually have the ability to purchase a firearm in Arizona without doing a background check, without doing a 4473, but you have to do it within Arizona. I don't remember. I think I remember that. Now that may have changed, but I know that was that way in Idaho, and I think it was also that way in Montana. That if you were an Arizona resident, you were buying it within Arizona, that you didn't have to, you didn't actually have to go through the background check process. But one of the other pieces of legislation that I failed to mention was the Brady Bill. The Brady Bill was derived after Reagan was the attempted assassination on Reagan. in 1981 or 82. It was 81 or 82. I think it was 81 when Hinckley tried to shoot Reagan. Not to get in the weeds here, but Hinckley's family was good friends with the Bushes. Anyway, whatever. Just saying. The Brady bill is what was used to that's the precipitating legislation to put in background checks on every firearm purchase, and then it was the NRA, the NR freaking A who freaking helped them.
I think it was a trade-off. They were going to give them something in return.
Well, yeah, but for me, my acronym for the NRA is negotiating rights away.
Well,
but
NRA
anyway,
is not always a problem, but often it is.
But anyway, I digress. I was answering somebody in the chat.
Well, I like Charlton Heston's viewpoint,
Cold dead hands.
Yeah, cold dead. Yeah. And then, of course, Nugent's, but I won't use that kind of language. Ultimately, though, going back to the original language, let's understand something. So first of all, the existence of the militia was necessary for the security of a free state. Had nothing to do with slavery. It was about protecting ourselves against tyranny, whether it be internal or external.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, we have to understand that the federal government originally had absolutely no say, no laws regarding our guns. And originally, neither did the states. If there was, and we talked about this last week, but I want to reiterate this. If there was any rules regarding guns, it was community driven and community enforced. In other words, localism. Every community is going to be different. Every community is going to have its own demands. Some of them are not going to care. Some of them might have a rule that says, hey, you can walk in with a gun on your hip, but it better stay holstered. And then there's other towns. You're going to have to stop by a sheriff's office to check it in. If you're found wandering around with a gun on your hip, you could be subject to a fine or something of that nature. But it was the local government that made that decision, the local people, the community that made that decision. It was none of the state's business. It was none of the federal government's business. Originally, that was the thinking. Because you have a right to keep and bear arms, to possess and to conceal carry. Now, once again, states and communities are allowed to make laws regarding your rights, but only the necessary laws. That we're not supposed to go beyond that. Well, Doug, what you're saying is you're against background checks. Well, it depends. I mean, what are you looking for? Should there be some people that might not be allowed to carry a gun? I don't know. I haven't really made that decision. Personally, I'm not a fan of background checks.
I'm going to jump in there because I was actually having a conversation with Scott about this.
Okay.
And I take the stance that I don't believe that if you are not incarcerated, if you are not incarcerated or on parole, then your right to carry a firearm should not be
right.
I mean, and I don't care what you've done. I don't care if it's a multiple murder. I don't care if you've been deemed by the state to be crazy. I don't care, because my feeling is that if every single person was armed and somebody got out of line, then somebody would be there to put it down.
Yeah, you know why there was no mass shootings around the American Civil War? American Revolution.
Let me finish this because I know I'm going to get some hate mail on this. But you've got to realize, in a constitutional republic, the will of the masses cannot overtake or override the individual right that the Constitution enumerates. And if the Constitution enumerates that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, it doesn't matter that you think, well, I know him and he shouldn't have a firearm, or he's a felon and he shouldn't have a firearm. That's not for you to decide. The Constitution gives that right out. And the whole point of the Constitution is to make sure that your will does not impede on somebody else's right. And I'm, you may disagree with that, but that is constitutionally sound.
Right. Now, like I said, states can make some laws, and different states might make different laws. And if the community as a whole decides, you know what, we don't want felons, that's their business. They can. I'm not saying they should, I'm saying that they can from a legal standpoint. But yeah, going back to what you were saying and saying, well, you know what, because you have this history, that history, we're going to, treat you differently. Is that no different than what they're trying to do with COVID and vaccines?
Exactly.
Isn't that the same thing? Well, you can't go to that stadium unless you can prove that you've been vaccinated. What does it matter? Who are you to tell me?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you to tell me whether or not I can be armed or whether or not I need to be vaccinated? Who are you to tell me that?
I find it, because I have found that many conservatives have bought into the notion that if somebody is a convicted felon, then they shouldn't have a firearm. And to me, that is the left having success in instituting their policies of not wanting people to have firearms. And it kind of like annoys me to a degree.
Well, it goes back to Christian principles. Christian principles, they paid their dues. You're forgiven, move on.
Exactly. Right.
You do it again, you're going to be stiffer penalty because you got that history, but we're not going to interfere with your rights because they're your rights. They belong to you.
And I know what the argument is well, it's dangerous to let that person have a weapon. It's
not if everybody's armed.
It's correct if everybody's armed. But we live, I would much rather live in dangerous liberty than finish the phrase for me.
You'd rather live in dangerous liberty than safe bondage.
Safe bondage or safe,
or something like that. That's Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson said that. Yeah.
Right.
And it's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to whether or not you agree with John Marshall Harlan in the Jacobson v. Massachusetts case. In the Jacobson versus Massachusetts case in 1905, a smallpox epidemic had broken out in Massachusetts, and they had made the vaccine, the inoculation, it was a real vaccine, a real inoculation, mandatory. And if you didn't get it, you paid a fine of $20. And the John Marshall Harlan, who was Chief Justice at that time, in his ruling said that when it comes to the safety of the community, your individual liberties may be suspended. So let's ask that. Do your rights have an asterisk next to them? Are you entitled to your rights that are given to you by God unless government says we're in danger because of a virus, or unless there's a lot of shootings going on? Is there an asterisk next to your God-given right? No. Well, Doug, don't you think you're being unreasonable? Gosh, we got to protect the community. Yeah, the best way you can protect the community. It's like someone asked me, Doug, what do you think of the Patriot Act? I said, we already have one. It's called the Second Amendment. If everybody's carrying, terrorism is the least of our worries. If everybody's carrying, somebody doing something like a mass shooting is the least of our worries. There's a reason gun shops don't get robbed. There's a reason gun shows don't have people running in, shooting up the place.
Right.
And to me, that's just logic.
Right.
I trust the community to be armed. What's best for the community is what's best for the individual collectively. So if the individuals collectively are carrying, then the community is good. But if you're going to try to put the community first without even considering the individuals, you're going to screw it all up for the community.
Right. But again, I reiterate that is the point of the Constitution. It is to protect individual liberty from the will of people of the masses. That's which is what democracy is.
Well, and also see what we have is this type of thinking that between rule of law and rule of man. The Second Amendment is about the rule of law. This gun control stuff, that's the rule of man. One of my sayings is this: when you abandon the rule of law, it doesn't take very long when you start following the rule of man and you start dancing around a golden calf. And I came up with last Saturday, and I'm going to put it out in an email. I already put it out once, but I'm going to put it out again by itself. There are basically 9 characteristics of the rule of law and 9 characteristics of the rule of man, and they oppose each other. So, and I'm not going to give commentary. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I want you to hear them so it helps you understand why the Second Amendment is so important, why we trust ourselves through being a godly people. So item 1, rule of law. This is where our system is based on God, and our laws are based on God's laws. Or rule of man. It's all based on the laws of judges, the ruling elite, and the whims of the society at large. When I say God's laws, by the way, I mean things like the 10 Commandments. Number 2, systems or laws are based on the concept that our rights are given to us by God. For rule of man, based on the concept that our rights are declared by government. Number 3, rule of law. People possess their rights and their rights are unalienable, cannot be separated from them. Number 3, for rule of man, this is what they think. The people serve the community, so they have no possession, and rights may be taken away by government when mandated by the ruling class, that it is for the common good. Number 4, rule of law. Governments are instituted to secure our natural rights. Secure. In other words, keep them where they belong in our possession. Number 4, rule of man. Governments are instituted to protect and guarantee our rights, which are defined, determined, and allowed by government. Number 5, rule of law. There is a higher power than government that even government must obey. Number 5, rule of man. Government is the highest power, and subjects may be restrained by the body politic when necessary to preserve the safety of the overall community. Number 6, rule of law. Written law is based on God's moral code. Number 6, rule of man. Written law is based on man's moral whims, typically of a self-gratifying nature. Number 7, rule of law. The principles of the rule of law are self-evident. If we're virtuous people, we know it. It's self-evident. Number 7, rule of man. The principles of the rule of man must be ingrained into the minds of the people through indoctrination programs. It's not self-evident. Number 8, rule of law. The members of the system are individuals and individually responsible for their own lives. Number 8, rule of man. The members of the system are part of a collective and must operate in a manner that is for the common good. Number 9, final one, rule of law. When the government becomes tyrannical, it is the duty of the people to alter or abolish it. Now, on this last one, January 6th will come up in your mind. Number 9, rule of man. Questioning governmental leadership is considered insurrection and must be punished. Was January 6th insurrection? What is insurrection? Insurrection isn't against the government. It's against the Constitution, the law of the land. Because we have a right to alter or abolish our government if it is tyrannical. So going against that government is not insurrection. Going against the Constitution is insurrection. All right, anyway, so that's my rule of law versus rule of man. And the reason why I like going through that is because it makes people think, because it brings up points that people I don't think realize or think about. This is much deeper than the Second Amendment. This is much deeper on whether or not you should be able to walk around with a gun on your hip. This comes down to rule of law versus rule of man. Do we want, well, let me back it up. Are some animals more equal than others?
Some are more equal than others.
I mean, Animal Farm Orwell, for those of you who are not familiar. Exactly. I mean, are you going to be a pig? Or are you going to be a horse? Or are you going to be the other animals? I don't know. But we have
You
to
haven't,
understand.
if you haven't read Animal Farm, I highly encourage everybody to read Animal Farm.
Yeah, right after you're done with 1984, you go from you read 1984, and then you just transition right into Animal Farm.
Yeah. Ah, boy, man. Orwell was, or that was some dark stuff.
Yeah, but those books were supposed to be a warning, not an instruction manual.
So it's interesting. It's total side note, not to go down a rabbit trail here, but what I understand about that was that Orwell actually was in MI6, and he wrote those books based on intelligence that he had seen, but he did it as a as like a with a fictitious. Orwell wasn't his real name, and I'm forgetting his name is escaping me, but anyway, that was.
And we've been told that he was a socialist, but my first response is, if he was a socialist, he wasn't a very good one.
Yeah,
because he was revealing the dangers of socialism, the way he wrote it. I mean, it's like calling Benjamin Franklin a deist. Well, if he was a deist, he wasn't a very good one, because he invoked the name of God and Scripture quite a bit.
Well, the one of the have you ever read Behold a Pale Horse?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So Behold a Pale Horse was written by his name is escaping me, doggone it.
It's a whole series of books. That's the first
one.
No,
Behold the Pale Horse was William Cooper.
Yeah.
William Cooper. And he actually he equated himself to Orwell. He just said, I have the courage to come out and put my name on it and say this is what's going on and tell the truth about it. Whereas Orwell was trying to do it in a kind of a more of a clandestine way. He was telling a fictitious story about what was coming and trying to warn people that way. Whereas he just wrote, Cooper wrote the book. He just wrote the book and said, this is the way it is.
Yeah, but I believe that wasn't there a couple more after Cooper's first one, or no?
I don't think so. He may have, but I think Behold the Pale Horse was the one that he did. But
there's another
Behold the Pale Horse. Behold the Pale Horse is the red pill book. Matthew, the other one was Animal Farm.
Yeah, Jonathan Cahn, Harbinger is another one to read.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've heard of Harbinger.
I have heard of Harbinger. Another author that I'm really that I got turned on to very recently was De Lorenzo.
Thomas J. De Lorenzo has been one of my favorites for a long time. His book, Hamilton's Curse, is the only book that I recommend as much, if not more often, than my own books.
Yeah.
So Hamilton's Curse, and then The Real Lincoln will open your eyes. Let's put it that way. It'll totally change your thinking. I try to not get into the Lincoln conversation until we get to 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. And I try to be careful with that conversation because people have them on such a pedestal. And when they hear what I've got to say, sometimes, let's just say, the conversation doesn't end well with some people. Mm-hmm. So I ask you, when we go through the Constitution, we talk about these concepts, so you have a little bit of an open mind. You understand where I'm coming from. I've been studying this stuff. It's like, and we talked about this before, it's almost like I know the founding fathers personally. I was thinking about that earlier today, how I was talking about somebody to my wife, and she's like, well, you talk like you've had coffee with him. I mean, he's been dead for 200 years. I said, I feel like I've had coffee with these guys because I've gone deeper than what's on the surface. I've gone into their childhoods, their lives, their writings. And I feel like I really do know these guys, and I understand what was going on here. And you have to understand that while there was a certain type of thinking in some places of the time, that was not going on in America. America was totally different, exceptional. And one of my favorite things is, and once again, this does tie into the Second Amendment, because this is one of the reasons the Second Amendment exists. One of the CRT arguments is that the white Americans, that it's all based on colonialism. We're just a bunch of colonialists. No, we're anti-colonialists. The most anti-colonialist thing that anybody can do is declare independence, flip the colonialists the finger, and then shoot them. That was a very anti-colonialist thing to do. America is about as anti-colonialist as it gets. We told the colonialists Screw you. We're going to go on our own, and we're not going to have colonies. We're going to have states. You are a full-blooded member of the Union.
Now, Doug, I want to ask a question. This is not from the chat, but this is from me, and this is kind of, I want to know if because you have such a deep knowledge of the founding fathers, if the founding fathers could have foreseen what firearms would have become in the 20th and 21st century, how do you feel they would have written or worded the Second Amendment to incorporate weaponry that, because they only had muskets back then. They didn't have any of the fancy weapons with the cartridges and the Gatling gun, which came out in 100 years after the fact, and then you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
well, hindsight number one is 2020, but I think the first thoughts that would go through their heads after they saw what they had is, "Can I have one?"
100%.
But I don't really know the answer to that, in the sense I don't want to put thoughts into their heads. But if I was one of them, I would want to clarify the language. I would have put something along the lines of the right of the people to keep and bear any kind of arm, regardless of technology, regardless of firepower, shall not be infringed.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, and this is a statement that kind of gets controversial sometimes, but I want you to understand this, folks. The purpose of the Second Amendment, or at least a part of the purpose, one of the purposes, was to be able to defend against a tyrannical federal government. What that means is our firepower should be equal to or greater than that of the federal government's.
Correct.
The first person said, "Yeah, here's me say, well, you think people should have nuclear bombs?" Well, I didn't necessarily say that, but what I am saying is the federal government is not the ones who can say you can't have one. None of their business. If I want to have a nuclear bomb, the federal government can't tell me I can't. Now, if my state wants to say, "Oh, Doug, kind of pushing it, we're going to pass a law," the state has that authority. I'm not saying they should, saying they have that authority. Federal government, though, doesn't. That's the purpose of the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. If I want to have a nuclear weapon, if I want to have an F-35, if I want to have a drone with multiple warheads on it, the federal government cannot legally tell me I cannot. But my local government might say, "You know what? I'll tell you what, Doug, you can have that drone, but we're going to ask you to only use it at certain times, certain places," or, that's up to the state. That's up to the community. The community's like, I'm really nervous about somebody having a nuclear bomb in the community. Maybe we should pass a law.
That actually brings
that's up to the community.
I don't know, you know what a staunch Second Amendment supporter I am. And I'm not even, but I'm not so sure that that's something that falls into the category of a mass destructive device, which is like a cannon or a grenade or something like that. Because if you take a grenade and you throw it into a crowded theater, you can kill 15, 20, 30 people.
And so if the state doesn't like that, then they should pass that law. The federal government can't. That's still an arm.
If you had a nuclear device that could kill 50,000 people, to me, that's a little.
Maybe in the name of national security, they might have a say, but ultimately, that is up to the local government. It's not up to the federal government. Your business is your business when it comes to federal government. That's why the states don't. That's why the Second Amendment doesn't apply to the states. The state can say, "You know what? Yeah, not real hip with that. We're going to pass this law saying you can't have it." I heard that there's a colony out there in or a territory out there in the atolls in the middle of the ocean. Have it there. Yeah. Ultimately, it just comes down to it's not the federal government's business. We don't want them operating inside here. That's our state's job. Well, yeah, but what if the state does it? Well, it's still not the federal government's job. The federal government is not a fail-safe in case your state doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Federal government's the problem. Why do you want them trying to protect you from your state? You protect you from your state, or you work with your state, or be a part of getting the right laws in your state. Federal government has no business getting involved in internal affairs.
Okay, so Ryan is just
now that has generated a question.
No, actually, to a completely different question, totally different direction.
Oh, okay.
He's curious about shotguns and rifles and if the Second Amendment pertains to them. And I would say absolutely, unquestionably, yes.
Yeah, it's not the federal government's business what you have.
Well, okay, so
Shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed, regardless of what the firearm is.
right, so firearms are firearms. There's two schools of thoughts on firearms. Number one is it's to protect yourself. So but it's to protect yourself and maybe your household, protect your person when you're out and about. But it's also, in the grand scheme, it's also to protect the people from a tyrannical government. So it really, it's two prongs there.
So why do we want the people I'm trying to protect myself from dictating to me what I'm allowed to have?
Right. So in that particular case, Ryan, shotguns and rifles are definitely fit that bill. Specifically rifles, because rifle is something that's going to protect you. It's either going to protect you from your home, or it is going to be the device that you use if you did have to protect yourself against a tyrannical government.
And also it's going to feed you.
Right. And you're correct. That's true. And then the shotgun is a great device. Just don't take a double barrel shotgun and go shoot it twice in the air, like Biden suggests.
Well, you know what I like about shotguns? You know what I like about shotguns is if someone breaks into my house, I ain't gonna miss.
Yeah, it's true.
And they know it.
Well, actually, one thing I love about shotguns is that if I stack, because I stack, I'll have the first shot is bird. The first two are bird. The second two are buck, and then the last couple are slugs. So that gives me the wide, and then the narrower, and then really narrow. Anyway.
Ultimately, though, when we talk about the Second Amendment, well-regulated militia is there to protect the state. You are a part of that militia. You're an unorganized militia. There's an organized, unorganized, but this applies to both. Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, a free Virginia, a free California, free Oklahoma. The right to keep and bear arms. It doesn't say the privilege. Doesn't say the occasional will let you. It says the right to keep, to own, and bear, to conceal carry arms shall not be infringed. Remember, this is written in the federal government. Shall not be infringed means every single law regarding arms. It says arms. Doesn't necessarily say firearms. It says arms. Now that was assumed to mean a firearm. Now we have to ask ourselves, do cannons fit into that? Do hand grenades fit into that? From the federal point of view, federal government's point of view, yes. None of their business. If my state wants to say, whoa, Doug, we're limiting everybody to 4 cannons. The state can pass that law. Federal government can't. Remember, very beginning, no gun law by the federal government, no gun laws by the states, but the communities have their gun laws. I don't have a problem with local communities or states making laws that they, believe to be necessary. It's when they go beyond necessary, I have a problem, like what's going on in California. But we don't then we shouldn't be going, hey, federal government, help us deal with the state. No, they're a bigger enemy than the state is.
Well, and you know what, I want you to highlight something, because this will be the last thing. I want you to highlight something that you did last week. Why do we want to give the states autonomy in being able to legislate stuff about guns? How is that? Why do you not want the federal government telling the states to do?
I'll say it in 2 ways. Number one, because each state's different, has its own personality, has its own culture. And so the need for the gun laws to be different in each state is necessary because we have different cultures. We are different from each other. The other one is simply this, and this is just, to me, a good way to think about it. It goes back to McDonald v. Chicago again. The city of Chicago had banned handguns. Well, and I get it. They have gun violence in the streets, all that jazz, and they think that's it's guns being bought into Indiana, or they're coming in something. No, but they have this problem. So I kind of get them wanting to do it. Someone sued. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. McDonald v. Chicago. I think it was like 2012, 2014, something like that.
Yeah.
And when all the Supreme Court said that the city of Chicago could not ban handguns because it violated the Second Amendment. My phone, my email, my texting, everything went nuts, man. I mean, I was getting contact with everybody. What a win for gun rights. And my response was this: don't be so sure. Here's why. Do you really want the federal government through a federal court dictating your city or state what it can or can't do regarding your gun rights? They may have gotten the answer right this time, but if they're going to dictate to your local government what it can do regarding gun rights, down the road, they're going to start dictating in a way that you're not going to like. You do not want that Pandora's box open. Take care of it locally. Local government is your business. Make sure they're abiding by what you want. Get the federal government out of it.
So, okay, so let me ask this then. Can the federal government come in and be the arbiter of a state issue is using the state laws, or is that something that's done at the state level?
No, it has to be done at the state level. The only way that the federal government can really come in as a mediator is if there's a dispute between states or between people of different states. Then they could be a mediator, but understand it's a mediation.
Right.
They're not supposed to write laws. A mediation is helping two parties come to a mutual agreement.
Well, that's a whole nother topic of conversation.
Yeah.
That's a road that we're not going to go down today. So if you guys have any other questions, it's 4 o'clock and I do not want to deprive Doug's wife.
Yeah.
Because I know, and it would be a really, really bad situation for Doug.
Well, I will say this. I love my wife, and people ask me all the time, what's the key to a good marriage? And I tell them just 3 words: just love her. However, when I was younger, it was a different 3 words: duck and weave. But now seriously, 37 years, and we've had our ups and downs. There's been a lot of stress, because of, our son is in the house with grandkids, or in the house, that's our stuff. We got our own things going on. And just to be able to get away, just the 2 of us.
Oh yeah,
and
100%. 100%. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you guys go, and I didn't really get many questions.
I like that image of the background, by the way. I like that image.
Oh, you like the yeah? Well, I thought it was apropos for the content.
No, I might just change my background image just for one show next week to show off a couple of my gun images.
Oh, but well, next week we're going over to the third and the fourth.
Third and Fourth Amendment, but we can, if anybody has questions about the second, we'll entertain that at the very beginning of the program. So if you've got questions like, Doug, I wish, Doug, you would have answered this or answered that, have it ready next week, very beginning of the show. First 10, 15 minutes, we'll answer those questions. Then third, fourth, fifth, and wherever else we go. I will say this, though. I want to remind you, in the Bill of Rights, the government is not there to protect or guarantee your rights. The language used in the First Amendment is Congress shall make no law. Second Amendment shall not be infringed. Third Amendment, no soldier shall. Fourth Amendment shall not be violated. That's not language telling the federal government to get involved. It's telling the government, hands off. None of your business. My rights belong to me.
And then the 10th Amendment is like whatever we didn't cover in the first.
That's the 9th Amendment.
What's that?
That's the 9th Amendment.
Well,
whatever rights we didn't cover, you can't stomp on those either. That's the 9th.
Right.
The 10th, states' rights.
States' rights. That's right. Okay.
Well, that's okay. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
See, Ron has gone through the Constitution with me 1.5 times, twice, maybe.
I think it's about 3 times. It's
3 times. Okay.
Twice. Yeah, I'm coming on.
Yeah, he's a newbie.
Anyway, guys, okay, well, we're going to call it now and let Doug go.
God bless you. And hey, for those of you who like to buy my books or like to donate, not that I'm saying anything, I'm not making any money this week because I take the week off. So if you want to buy a few books or something, I won't argue. Check. I got 7 of them. And
I highly, excuse me, I'm sorry, Doug. I highly recommend that you listen to Scott tonight. He's going to be interviewing Jim Willey, and Jim Willey is a great interview. Very, very knowledgeable about economics and economy, and with what's happening right now, he's going to be a very informative interview, and that's going on right now. So Forgive me, Doug. I'm not going to mean to cut you off, but
Go check out
Waiting.
Scott. All of you.
Cool.
We'll see you later.
we'll talk to you guys later. See you next week.